and welcome to another Craft With Me video. And today, we are making a ferret. If you are new to this channel, welcome. If you are returning, welcome back to my video. This may seem a little different than what we usually do because today we are discussing philosophy, but I hope you all enjoy it anyways. And if you don't like philosophy, maybe just turn this video on silent or something, I don't know. And if you're my professor or TA grading this video, I know that both of you are kind, generous people who wouldn't think to fail a student on their final exam. And moving on. So you may be wondering how a ferret and philosophy are related. Well, today we are talking about the ethics of lying. Well, apparently ferrets are thought to symbolize cunningness, slyness, and intellect. Whoever thought of this has clearly not hung out with these adorable doofuses, but nevertheless, I thought lying went well with this description. So as I'm laying down the structure of my ferret, let's discuss the base of my argument. The question we'll be examining today is, what is the nature of lying? I propose that lying is a neutral tool that is an action without morality in itself, meaning that it needs the context of the situation to be able to determine whether it is good or bad. To prove this to you, I'm going to need to lay down some operational definitions. For purposes of my argument, the definition of lying is the act of saying something that is untrue. Deception is the act of leading someone to believe that something is untrue, whether through lying or through other means. Therefore, this puts the relationship of the two as lying being a method to achieve deception, since lying is only one of the many ways one can deceive. To narrow down our focus today, we are going to be discussing lying in the medical context, which we will begin right after we finish admiring my handiwork so far. Alright, now that we've all admired the ferret, let's enhance our understanding of the issue just as this ferret is being enhanced by the adding of details in fur. So in order to be able to establish the neutrality of lying, we need to figure out what a medical practitioner's obligation is in the matter. So what are their obligations? Well, Jennifer Jackson maintains that trust is a vital part of the relationship between practitioner and patient. I agree. However, I believe that the way to get to trust is through autonomy and care. If a patient isn't allowed to act out their own wishes, then how can they trust that the practitioner will assist them in achieving their goals? Furthermore, a practitioner must act in a way that benefits the patient, otherwise the patient's goal in being treated, why they came to the doctors in the first place, is not met, and the patient will not trust that the doctor will help them. With that in mind, let's lay out the groundwork for lying. If lying is neutral, then there must be conditions where lying is considered moral. So what are the conditions that must be met in order for that to happen? I propose 2 rules that practitioners must follow when considering lying to their patients. Number 1. The practitioner must not take away autonomy where autonomy is expected. This means that all patients must have adequate information to be able to make their own decisions. A sub-rule to this is that autonomy is not expected in cases where patients are a danger to themselves or others. Another point where autonomy wouldn't necessarily apply to the patient is in cases where patients cannot make decisions for themselves. The power of decisions, and therefore the rules laid out, then apply to the person with legal attorney over the patient. If there's no one available to speak on the patient's behalf, then the patient should be treated using standardized practice based off of what is known about them. As a practitioner, you also have the duty to keep those with legal authority over your patient in the know. Therefore, they must have enough information, just like your patients, to be able to have the autonomy to make decisions as well. Number 2. Practitioners must not harm the patient, psychologically, physically, or otherwise, or put others at risk. This may seem simple, but if you think about it, the rules are really quite strict. Yet there are times where lying and deception are okay under these conditions. One condition that falls under our rules that I would like to point out is protecting patients from others. Let's say you have a minor who had a back alley abortion behind their parents' back and needs care to fix it. Do you tell the parents, that their daughter had a back alley abortion against the daughter's wishes? I would say no, because the parents do not need to know what happened in the past to make a full decision of the care for her in the future. Therefore, deception is okay. In any case where deception is okay, so with lying, as lying is an action to cause deception. Another scenario I would like to bring to your attention is protecting others from the patient. Let's say two patients have a fight and they come to the same hospital, and one asks if the other patient is there. Do you tell your patient about the presence of the person that they had a fight with? I would say no, as it seems like this patient has a grudge against it and you don't want another fight breaking out in the hospital. Places where a patient is a danger to themselves or others, autonomy is not expected. To say no that the other patient isn't there sure might rob them of the autonomy of going to find the patient, but you are protecting the unknown patient from your patient who means harm. And by telling them no, you're also not psychologically or physically harming them, you're just keeping them in the dark of the presence of who they fought with. I would also like to point out protecting your patient's mental health. So there are other points where you would need to protect your patient outside of their physical safety. Let's say your patient asks if you believe that there is life after death. Let's say that you don't believe that. Do you tell them the truth? So in this case, you would be lying to your patient if you said that yes, there is life after death. But in doing so, you would be helping your patient. For one, you would be giving him hope, a little bit more comfort in their impending death. However, you would not be taking away their autonomy, and you wouldn't be harming the patient. You would be actually psychologically helping them. So that's a case where lying is an option, and it is a valid option and would not be going against our rules. So let's say a child asks if they're going to die or if something's going to hurt. Do you tell them point blank? So this is a scenario where it must be handled delicately, and let's look at our rules. Autonomy is somewhat expected. In cases of children, parents have the authority to make decisions for their child. So in that case, the parent must be up to date on the information of their child so they can make that full decision. However, children do not make the decisions, so you need to really look at Rule 2, which is must not harm the patient psychologically, physically, or otherwise. So that information could psychologically harm them, but lying may not. So you need to really balance the information. Is it more harmful for them to know that they're going to die or for them to not know? So let's take a look at what other philosophers might think on the issue. One of the most direct links to my lying philosophy is Jennifer Jackson, who believes that you should never lie because lying undermines trust, especially in the medical field. The major con that I would like to point out with Jackson is that she is very, very focused on lying specifically, but not deception. But as we pointed out earlier, lying is just a means to get to deception. So in any case where deception is okay, so should lying, as it's just a tool to deceive. But in Jackson's view, you can't lie, but if you need to deceive to avoid lying, that's okay. She also doesn't identify autonomy as a major contributor to trust, which I think is an important thing to point out, because anyone who knows what it feels like to have their hands tied in a situation definitely knows that that situation can make them feel helpless. And in times when you feel helpless, you're definitely not going to trust someone who has made you feel that way. But Letson focuses his arguments on pain, specifically intense chronic pain or illness. He says that those who are in extreme pain cannot make rational decisions for themselves. I would say in those cases we refer back to the the legal attorney, which therefore our rules that we laid out would go towards the attorney and not towards the patient, at least until they're put in a stabilized condition where they can speak for themselves. Gamble focuses his arguments on medical futility and ultimately comes to the decision that the judgment of futility should be up to the patient. I agree with that, and we both agree that it's because of autonomy. Only the patient can decide what's best for them, and I think Gamble really does a great job in highlighting that by saying that whether a treatment is futile involves evaluating its chances of producing a given result and judging whether the result would be worthwhile. This decision should be in the patient's hand or in the surrogate's, since the treatment in question is typically the only chance of continued life. The options are not difficult to understand, and the decision depends on personal views regarding when life is worth living, which I don't think could be put in any better terms. Because everyone has their own goals in life, and not one doctor can fully understand that. It has to be up to the patient who knows themselves best. And the patient needs all the proper information to be able to practice that autonomy, which means you shouldn't lie in this circumstance. And then you have Singer, who wrote a full paper on the ethics of voluntary euthanasia. Now that is definitely a very sensitive topic. I would maintain that voluntary euthanasia is not voluntary unless it follows all of our rules, where patient is adequately informed of all treatments, the patient has full autonomy, and they're in a place psychologically and physically where they can make that decision. If it's in case of a coma where they can't make that decision, you might need to pull the plug. That goes to the person next in line who has a legal attorney over the patient. If neither of these rules are met, the patient should be treated with standardized care. This mirrors Singer's idea of voluntary euthanasia, as he does believe that people do have the ability to judge whether or not life is worth living. I believe our arguments do mirror on that. I would like to say that he doesn't really touch on scenarios of mental health, which I think is an important consideration to have when thinking about whether or not the patient is psychologically able to make that kind of decision. We just went through a lot of examples of medical practice using our rules to lie. To sum it up, in order to lie, your lie must not take away autonomy where autonomy is expected, and it must not harm the patient or put others at risk. I hope I inspired you all to think a little more like philosophers today with the issues most prevalent to you. And as always, I'll see everyone next time.